Marriage can be difficult. Marriage can be a time when we are mixing two opposites, two extremes together. And how is it that we can find that common ground? There was a little girl who very often used to lose her temper. And her mother had an idea for her. She says, you know what, every time that you lose your temper, what I want you to do is go out into the back of our house. There's a fence. Take a needle, take a hammer. Every time you lose your temper, hammer the nail into the wooden fence. And so she did. At the end of the first day, she had no less than 30 nails nailed into the fence. But eventually she learned that it was easier to hold her temper than to hammer the nail into the fence. Finally the day came when she went to her mother and she says, you know, Mother, today I didn't need to hammer any nails in the fence at all. Her mother says, that's wonderful, that's fantastic, that's great. But now I want you to do something else. At the end of every day that you don't have to hammer a nail into the fence, I want you to take out one of the nails. She started doing this for several days. After about a month or 2 months or a few months later, she comes to her mother and she says, you know what? All the nails are completely out of the fence. Again, her mother encourages her and says, this is wonderful, this is amazing, but come here, I want to show you something. She takes her to the fence and she says, look here, what do you see? There were holes, many, many holes in the fence. And her mother teaches her a very essential lesson. She says, every time we lose our temper, every time we talk out in rage, in anger, we hurt somebody. We cause a hole in someone's heart. And that hole is not something that ever disappears. I think this is a significant message for marriage, for any relationship. Anytime we talk out in pain or anger, we're causing that hole. And if we would remember that message, if we would remember that hole that we're causing, how much more careful with our words we would be. In Canada, I guess here as well, we have what's called Gmail. Have it here too? I use my Gmail all the time. It's for email. It's a special account for email. The engineer for Gmail recently came out with a new, wonderful innovation. He calls it Google Goggles. What are Google Goggles? He says one night he came home from partying, he was quite intoxicated, and he fired off an email to somebody who he wasn't exactly in the best terms with, and you can imagine the repercussions of the email that he sent when he sent it out of anger. As a result, he decided to make this Google Goggles. What is it? It's a certain setting that you can set on your email that it forces you to answer a simple additional question, a simple question in mathematics. If you're able to answer this question in mathematics to add up whatever it is, the assumption is that you're not intoxicated and you're rational enough, you're sane enough to write an email. And as I'm reading that, he explains there's no embarrassment in feeling the need for an extra additional help. There's no embarrassment for this extra tool that will save you from the embarrassment later of typing something while you're tipsy and then regretting it. And I'm thinking as I read this, could you imagine if all of us had these Google Goggles in our own lives? How often do we say something out of fury, out of envy, out of all kinds of negative feelings and characteristics and qualities? Imagine if instead we had this Google Goggles that said, hold on a second, hold on, stop, think. Who's in the driver's seat at this moment? Are you intoxicated? Are you intoxicated with your emotions? Are you intoxicated with your rage? Are you intoxicated with your envy, with your jealousy? Are you intoxicated at this moment, and therefore the reaction, the email, the response from you that is going to come out at this moment is going to be one that in the morning you'll regret? We do have that ability of Google Goggles. It's called self-control. It's called holding back. When you feel like you want so desperately to make that snide comment, to make that remark, hold back. You can always say it in the morning. You can always say it a little later if you still so desire. Google Goggles, a lesson on email, but so much more of an important lesson on how to lead our lives. I have 6 children, thank God. My oldest got married about 1.5 years ago. My youngest is actually on the cover of my books. She's now 5 years old. I remember when my oldest daughter first got married, about 1.5 years ago. It was in a very emotional time. It's very emotional, your first daughter, your first child getting married. And as we're starting at the chuppah, the special ceremony, the marriage ceremony, we're waiting, we're going around, we're circling the groom, we're saying all the blessings, the different various blessings. And just like at every Jewish wedding, there was this almost collective moment of silence. After all the blessings were said, right before the Mazel Tov. What happens then? Right before we say Mazel Tov. Breaking of the glass. And I was thinking at that moment, right after we break the glass, suddenly there's an uproarious Mazel Tov, as if that was the significant event of the marriage, almost signifying that this is the momentous moment that completes the marriage. Of course we know the reason why we break a glass at a marriage is because we want to remember, even at a time of such joy, such happiness, we want to remember the destruction of the temples. That even in a moment when we're feeling such celebration, we still remember that we are in exile, that the temple has been destroyed, and that we are here in exile. But yet, that breaking of the glass has almost become the congratulatory moment, the moment that everyone's anticipating for, after which everyone says this big, uproarious Mazel Tov. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, why? Why is that? Why is that almost the momentous moment of the marriage, confirming almost the marriage? And if you think about it, what is it that we do when we break the glass? When we break the glass, we're saying that none of us, no person is complete. No person is whole. We're all broken. None of us are perfect. None of us are 100% complete, with no flaws, no imperfections. We all have flaws. We all have imperfections. And by breaking that glass, we're saying, I'm willing to accept you with your imperfections, with your flaws, with your cracks, with your fissures. I realize that none of us are perfect. And I'm at this moment ready to accept another person into my life who I know is not perfect. We tend to have a vision before we get married of our spouse as someone who's just this perfect being. And at that marriage ceremony, before the marriage can be complete, we need to come to a new perception, a new understanding that no one is perfect. No one is complete. No one doesn't have cracks and fissures and flaws and a whole chips on their shoulder. But the marriage can only happen. The Mazel Tov can only take place once we're ready to come to this perception, once we're ready to accept our spouse and ourselves with our imperfections, with our flaws, with our deficiencies, and say we're going to work on them and be there for one another. There's a beautiful teaching in the Talmud, which is really one of my favorite teachings. Rav says, be careful with the feelings of your wife. Be careful never to pain your wife, because her tears come readily, her pain comes quickly. I read this teaching, and I thought this is a remarkable teaching that teaches us not only about how husbands should treat their wives and wives treating their husbands, but how all of us should be in every relationship that we're in. Notice his words. He says, be careful not to pain your wife because her pain comes readily. Her tears come readily. He doesn't say, be nice to your wife, be sensitive, be considerate, because your idea of sensitivity, your idea of consideration, your idea of generosity, your idea of being nice to her might be completely and entirely different from her idea. What she needs in the relationship might be a completely different definition than what you need. And therefore Rav says, he does not say be nice to her, be sensitive, be generous, etc. He says be careful with her feelings because she pains easily. Realize what will pain her. Realize what will affect her. Realize what will make her happy. Realize what will hurt her. And don't do it. Don't act in a way that's going to be painful for her. Make sure you do act in a way that will be making her joyful. Because this isn't about you and your perceptions. It's about how she's feeling. I think so often in relationships, whether it be spousal relationships or friendship relationships, we think in terms of what I would like. This is what I would like, so I assume the other person would like the same thing. And Rav is teaching us, don't think in terms of your own perception. You want a relationship? Then a relationship has to be on her terms or on his terms. What is it that's going to make him or her happy? What is it that's going to pain them? This is the way of thinking that you need to be thinking. I remember I was speaking to a friend of mine many years ago who has a severely disabled child. And she says to me, Chana, I just can't understand how some people are so petty. They get so into the small stuff in life. They get so upset. They sweat over the little small mundane issues in life. And being that I've had this challenge my entire life, I can't get upset over the little things. I look at the bigger picture. And I said to her, it's amazing that you have that ability to look at the big picture. But I think it's important for you to understand that when someone gets upset over these little things, for them that is a big thing. Your perception has now changed because of your life experiences. But for her or for him, when he does get upset over these little things, it's big. It's their world. And that's what Rav is teaching us. Don't consider your own perceptions in life. Consider the perceptions of another. You want a relationship? It's got to be on her terms or his terms. Realize what it is that hurts him or her and avoid it. In the very first pages of Genesis, Bereshit, we have inbred in the story exactly what the differences are between men and women. My husband bought me a little bookmark many years ago. I hope I don't insult the men in the room. It said, a woman must do twice as much as a man to be considered half as good. And then in little words it said, fortunately, that's not very difficult. The jokes of man and women and the tension between men and women is, this is the bestseller. The best-selling books are all about the relationships and how to have a better relationship. And men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And how can the two of us get along? We're from such different planets. And I think in the very first pages of Genesis, of Bereshit, we have within the story, if we look closely enough, really embedded how it is, what it is that our differences are, what it is that our different paths and emotional needs are, and how it is that we can really help one another to achieve it. If we think back to the very first day of creation, the beginning, the first day, all of creation is set out, all the things are set, the world is ready, the trees, the birds, the grass, the animals. Finally, the sixth day comes and we're ready for the pinnacle of creation, for humankind, for humanity himself to be born. Adam is created. And in the first chapter of Bereshit, when Adam is created, and let me just parenthetically put in, when we say that Adam was created as an androgynous being, meaning he had male and female characteristics. He was a man, but he was created in a way that he had both characteristics. So in the first pages of Genesis, we see Adam is finally created, and what does God tell him? God says to him, your job now is go out there, rule over the world, conquer the world, rule over the fish of the sea, rule over the birds of the sky, rule over the animals, conquer the world. His job, man's job, is to make order. Order from the chaos. Conquer it. Settle it. Establish a rule, establish an order, establish a way of this world. Interestingly, it's only in the next chapter, in chapter 2, that we see the actual creation of womankind. We see God says to man at that point, Lo tov hayota adam levado. This is not good, man being alone. Now I'm going to create womankind. I have this new job that needs to be done in this world, this new idea that needs to be cultivated in this world. And to do it, man is not good for this job, but we need a uniquely feminine creature, and for this we need women. What happens here? As soon as Chava is created, she's formed from mankind, she's formed from his rib, she's formed from a part of his inner self. And what happens? As soon as this new being is created, God has a new directive. What does God now command them? Now God says, I want you to guard the garden. Guard the garden. Redeem the garden. Make it into a home for God. Do you notice the difference here? Chapter 1, chapter 2. Chapter 1 is talking about conquest, conquering the world. Chapter 2 is talking about guarding a home, redeeming the world, making the world into a home for God. Chapter 1 is talking about making order out of the disorder, conquering, ruling over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, ruling over the world. Chapter 2 starts talking about guarding, nurturing, making a home, redeeming this world. Do you notice this difference? This dichotomy? This, in essence, is the difference in the spiritual expertise and the spiritual mission of man and woman. Man is told to go out there and conquer the world, make order of the world. Woman is told to go out there and redeem the world, guard it, nurture it. I think the key to understanding the differences between man and woman is within these 2 chapters of Genesis. We see differences psychologically, physically, biologically, emotionally, and spiritually within these 2 chapters of the various roles and expertise of each. Now, I want to qualify this, that when I'm going to be talking about men and women, I don't really mean men and women. I mean masculine forces and feminine forces. When we talk in Torah about gender, it sounds a little stereotypical because each woman really has some masculine qualities and each man really has some feminine qualities. Generally, men act with the dominant masculine qualities and generally women act with dominant feminine qualities. But there is an overlap. The point is that there is this difference and there is this general way of acting, just like we could say that generally men are taller than women, even though you see many women who are taller than many men. But physically, most men are taller than women. So it's the stereotype or the box that we're going to be creating is one that we're really referring to the masculine forces and the feminine forces of creation. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter because it does overlap. But the idea is that there is these various forces, and how is it that we can find the common ground? Okay, let's take a moment to think about what are women's basic complaints against men. And I'll open this up to you. Who's going to be brave enough to try? Usually the ladies are the ones to offer first.
I'll help you. Let's try.
Yes.
Usually it doesn't listen, it doesn't understand.
Perfect. Number 1 complaint.
You don't know.
You never listen to me. Number 2 complaint. You never help around the house. This is, by the way, a study that was done. Third complaint, you don't spend enough time with me. Fourth complaint, we never go anywhere together anymore. Any men in the room would like to share their complaints? At this point, the men are usually looking at their wife and thinking, shouldn't I, I'm going to get cut later. Okay, men's complaints. Number 1, you're always trying to change me. Number 2, you're letting yourself go. Number 3, you're nagging me to death. And number 4, you blame me for everything. This is the 4 common disconnects, as they call it in their study, or the 4 basic common complaints that women have against men and men have against women. I think if we look at these complaints, we'll see these complaints are embedded in what we just spoke about in the first verses of Genesis, of Bereshit. But let's take this to a common relationship scenario. We'll take a couple, we'll call them Sarah and Barry. Hey, Sarah and Barry are going out. They're driving to a destination. It's quite a long distance to where they have to get to. They're in the car driving, and of course Barry wants to get to his destination as fast as he can. They both want to. After several hours of driving, Sarah looks at Barry and she says, you know, I see in another mile there's a rest area coming up. I imagine you have these in Europe as well. There's a rest area with a coffee shop coming up. Would you like to stop for a cup of coffee or a cold drink? Barry says, no, just as he drives past the rest area. Every woman in this room knows that when Sarah asked if Barry wants to stop for a coffee, she wanted to stop. She was giving her husband the opportunity to reciprocate to her and to say, would you like to stop? Now, every man in this room knows that had Sarah said, I'd really like to stop for a cup of coffee, Barry would have been more than happy to stop for a cup of coffee. But when she asked him, do you want to stop for a cup of coffee? He answered no, because he didn't want to stop for a cup of coffee. There was deafening silence in the car for the next 15 minutes until Barry actually thought in his mind, what did he possibly do wrong? And he went over the conversation in his mind and he couldn't fathom what exactly did he do wrong. He didn't want a cup of coffee. He answered he didn't want a cup of coffee. If she would have asked for the cup of coffee, he would have been overjoyed to stop for her for the cup of coffee. But in his mind, Barry wanted to get from the destination to his goal. Goal-directed. The first chapter of Genesis talks about ruling over, conquering, setting order, getting to a destination. Getting there, goal-oriented, as fast as you can, as quickly as possible, as most efficiently as possible. But the second chapter of Genesis talks about gardening, nurturing relationships, developing a relationship, developing a contact. For Sarah, this trip wasn't only about getting from point A to point B. This was about spending the time together, enjoying one another. She was allowing him to reciprocate to her and to say to her, would you like the cup of coffee? And when he didn't do that, it was absolute for her. It was an absolute letdown. Interestingly, studies show the difference in managerial skills between men and women. There are many women now in the workforce, and there are many studies that discuss the different styles between men and women managers. And what the studies came up with, I found very interesting, is it talks about men's commanding style versus women's team building, consensus approach. Men, it says, tend to give answers. Women tend to ask questions. They look at it as a team-building consensus approach, this nurturing ability, rather than the male goal-oriented ability. The masculine and feminine arenas of expertise reflect our spiritual expertise, our spiritual mission in life. How we relate to one another is because of the mission that we were given to complete in this world. And it's up to us to know how to relate to one another. What is his mindset? What is her mindset? And how can we connect? Here's another example. Sarah and Barry are going out. It's late. They're a little late. They were supposed to be there already. Finally, she comes down. And what does she say? So, how do I look? Right? So, how do I look? His answer? Fine, let's go. What is she asking for? Nurturance. It's not only about getting to the destination, it's about the nurturance, the guarding, the protecting. She wants to hear how beautiful she looks. She wants to know, so does the new hairstyle look good? Do you like the color? And he's, come on, let's go, let's get out the door already, we're late. To him, it's the conquering, it's the goal-oriented. To her, it's all about the experience. Or take this example. Again, Barry and Sarah are ready to go out. Except, this time, she's not ready. Because she says, I've got nothing to wear. And he says, a cupboard full, you have 65 outfits in your closet. What do you mean you don't have anything to wear? And she's like, well, the black outfit makes me look fat. The blue outfit is out of style. And the green one I already wore the last 2 times. What is she saying by saying, I've got nothing to wear? Imagine if Barry would answer her and say, you know, that green outfit, it just makes your eyes sparkle. You just look so dazzling in it. Suddenly, it would give her an entirely new perception on the clothes that she has. She's asking for that nurturance, and he's into, does this mean a new shopping trip to the mall to get some more clothes? He's into the conquest. She's into the nurturance. The proverbial example of men and women driving. Again, Sarah and Barry going to their destination, and they get lost. They get lost. They don't know where to go. She says, go and ask directions. He says, no, I know the way. I'll figure it out. He goes around the same circle about 10 times before she again says, exasperated, go ask for directions. But let's understand what's working here. Why doesn't he want to go ask for directions? And why is she insisting that he ask for directions? Because for her, asking directions is just a way of connecting with other people, allowing them to nurture her, connecting, making a relationship. So we stop and we ask for directions. To him, asking for directions means utter and total failure. He wanted to get to his destination. He cannot figure out a way to get to his destination. It means he failed. Completely different perception of the circumstances surrounding them. Let's talk a little Kabbalah now. According to Kabbalah, the world was created with 10 divine sfirot, which is divine channels that create our world. Meaning that in order to infuse our world with different characteristics and different qualities, these divine channels emanate and bring about the creation of our world. So the Sphira of Chachma, for example, introduces the element of wisdom, intellect into our world. The Sphira of Chesed introduces kindness, giving into our world. Gvura, on the other hand, introduces restraint, holding back. There are 3 intellectual faculties, and the rest of the 7 are different characteristics. The 6 sfirot, from Chesed to Yesod, represent characteristics, qualities that we use in our day-to-day activities, loving kindness, restraint, etc. According to Kabbalah, the 6 sfirot represent the outward mode, They represent the 6 directions in our world. We live in a 3-dimensional world. In a 3-dimensional world, you have 6 different directions. North, south, west, east, up, down. 6 different ways of reaching out to our world. But there's a 7th. Anyone know the 7th? You can't have Malchut, which represents which direction?
To influence the...
So if we talk about the directions of the world, north, south, west, east, up, down, what would be the 7th direction? The inner dot. You can't have directions if you don't have a focal point, if you don't have an axis. If you don't have a center point, you can't reach out to all the different directions. According to Sefer Yetzirah, which is a very Kabbalistic book, the 6 days of the week, from Sunday to Friday, represent these 6 different directions, these 6 different sfirot, where we're in an outward mode. All week long we're doing, we're going, we're running, we're accomplishing, we're conquering. Comes Shabbat, and we stop. What do we stop? We begin to absorb. We take it in. All the week long we're running, and doing. Comes Shabbat and we're ready to absorb that, all that we've done. And therefore it says the Shabbat is the blessing for the entire week. Because if you're so busy in the state of going and doing, you can't absorb it. You can't bring it inner. According to Kabbalah, man, the masculine, represents the 6 days of the week. Women represent that focal point, that inner dot, that point that brings in all the various outward modes of going and doing and absorbs it within. And that is why we see even in communication, this is represented in the masculine and feminine communication. At the end of the day, ask a man, so how was your day? Answer?
Hectic.
Hectic. Good. Fine. At the end of the day, ask a woman, so how was your day? What do you get?
Speech.
Well, it was good. In the morning, I met with this one, and in the afternoon, and this kid was doing this, and my work, and my boss. You don't get just a one-word answer, fine. Ever ask a man what a color of a napkin at an event was? If you do get any answer, you'll get red, blue, white. Ask a woman for the color of someone's dress. What will you get?
Details.
Mauve, taupe, cream, aqua.
Only American women talk like that.
Oh, okay. Actually, scientifically, it's been proven that the amount of the retina of the eye is what takes care of the color, the cone-shaped part of the eye. Women have more cone-shaped cells in their eye, and that accounts for the various shades of color, the various components, the various aqua, cream, all the different colors that they'll talk about, rather than red, blue, and green.
Because Isha is big enough.
And this idea of reaching out to all, not the direct line, but the circle. A woman's most hated phrase is, can you get to the point? Can you get to the point? Get to the point, please. Women use communication to build relationships, to rapport with one another. Men, in studies it has been proven, men use succinct, focused words. They use communication to gain the upper hand, to win the upper hand, to bring across their perspective. And that's why their vocabulary will often be excellent vocabulary with very select, chosen words that will gain the upper hand. Whereas women use communication to nurture relationships. In fact, women use relationships as reward and punishment. How does a woman use relationship as communication as punishment? The silent treatment. What's the silent treatment? I'm punishing you because of what you did. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to talk to you. They tell of a husband and wife that got into a big fight. Finally, after 3 days, the husband turns to the wife and says, so by the way, do you know where my shirt is? She says, oh, and now you're talking to me? He says, what do you mean? She says, haven't you noticed for the last 3 days I haven't been talking to you? He says, oh, I thought we were just getting along. Communication between men and women is very much this goal-oriented or the nurturance. Kabbalah refers to it as shapes. We have the idea of a line and the idea of a circle. Men represent the line, women represent the circle. Physically, emotionally, have a woman coming in and she says, oh, I gotta go to sleep. A man says, oh, I gotta go to sleep, and what does he do? He goes to sleep. A woman says, oh, I gotta go to sleep, and what does she do? She turns off the lights, wash the dishes, prepare the lunch for tomorrow for the kids. Circular. Circular before she gets to her destination. The line and the circle. They both get there eventually, but it's how they get there. It's the difference of the experience, the difference of the conquest versus the nurturance. The guarding and protecting and nurturing our world versus the conquering our world and getting there quickly. And interestingly, if we look at the Jewish wedding, we find this idea of the circle and the line constantly. The kala, the bride, circles the groom, whereas the groom stands like the line. She encircles him several times. He gives her the ketubah. What is the ketubah? It's a rolled scroll. He hands her a piece of paper that's rolled up like a scroll. What does it look like when it's rolled up like a scroll? Both. Combination. A line and a circle. To show that we're now combining our qualities. We're combining the line, we're combining the circle, and we're building a life together, appreciating one another's qualities, and making this work. So the wife says, are you listening to me? The wife means, too late, you're doomed. The wife says, I'm not yelling. She means, yes I am, I think this is important. The wife says, nothing's wrong. What does she mean? Everything's wrong, and you better probe and ask me again and again and again until you figure it out. I want you to nurture me at this moment. Both approaches are necessary for our world. And sometimes this nurturance could actually lead to martyrdom. It could lead to the point where she's not taking care of herself. So he says, you're letting yourself go. He doesn't want her to just take care of everything around her. If she says she's got to go to sleep, he wants her to just go to sleep, not to do that circular move all around the house to get everything under control. They say of this joke about this Jewish mother, what does her answering machine sound like? She says, if you're calling for Lux, press 1. If you're calling for Lux and bagels, press 2. If you're calling for Lux, bagels, and cream cheese, press 3. If you're calling to find out how I am, you've got the wrong number. No one cares how I am. I could even be dead by now. This idea of not taking care of ourselves, not nurturing ourselves, because we're so busy in this circle, is not something positive. So let's go back to the Bereshit story. I think we have the solution here as well. In these very first pages, we have the solution to all these women's complaints and men's complaints. If you look at the list, women's complaints, what is basically a woman saying? Basically, she's saying, you never listen to me, you never help, you don't spend time, we never go anywhere. What is she saying? She's saying, I want to be nurtured. I want to be cherished. I want to be the center of your world. I want you to look at me like I am the center of your world. If we think back again to the Bereshit story, When man was created, think about it. He had everything around him. He had the fruits, the Garden of Eden, the trees. Beauty was surrounding him. The scenery was incredible, even nicer than in Davos. Everything. And what does God say to him? This is no good. This is no good. You think you have everything? This is no good. Not only is it's just not good. Not it's maybe a little bit missing. This is no good. This is no good. This state is no good. What was God saying to man? He was saying, you might have everything in your life. A great career, health, everything. It's not good. Unless you can nurture her, unless you can make her the center of your world, your life will be miserable. This is no good. On the other hand, let's look at when woman was created. Woman is created, she's taken from man, she's the closest thing to him. She understands him better than anything. She's a part of him. And what does God tell her? What is her job? God commands her to be an ezer kenegdo, a helpmate against him. A helpmate for him. God says to her, he needs you. Build him up. You know what he needs. Your smile, your nod of approval, your encouraging words. This is what he needs. This is oxygen to his very life. You pump the energy into him. He needs that encouragement. Don't try to change him into something else, which is what men's basically complaint is. You're trying to change me. You're nagging me. You're blaming me. Men's complaint is, you're trying to make me into something that I'm not. This is who I am. What does God say to woman? Build him up. Accept him for who he is. Be his helpmate. Don't try to make him into something else. Let him be who he is. Just better. Just a better version, not something else that he is. Encourage him. Don't criticize and devastate him with it. The Rebbe once said, Isha kshera oseratzon ba'ala, which in Hebrew means a Jewish woman of valor does the will of her husband. And the Rebbe explained it, the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained it very interesting. He says a woman, a smart woman, oseh, she makes the will of her husband. Not by changing him. She makes it his will. She makes the will of his to help her, to nurture her, to be a partner with her. She makes the will of his something positive.
What is behind it? You changed it from naked to...
Well, if you look at the commentaries there are many commentaries that explain it. Some say, as you say, against him, and some say to opposite, parallel to him. Not against him, but parallel. You're working on a parallel line. You're standing like I'm standing opposite her. Not opposite in the sense of antagonistic, across. Exactly.
Sometimes being against, our Rebbe says, sometimes being against doesn't mean being against. Showing a different perspective can be a help.
Very good. Thank you. Do you have GPSs here? GPS, yeah? We go on a lot of trips, a lot of road trips, so my husband bought a GPS for us. And the first time that we're driving with the GPS, something was really bothering me. I'm getting more and more infuriated by the moment. I hear this sweet little voice, this feminine voice, saying, turn right, 100 meters. And he does. He turns right in 100 meters. Turn left, next exit. And he does. And it was excruciating difficult to watch him follow this lovely feminine voice without once getting angry, without once screaming back, just simply following like this docile little sheep. I'm thinking, what happened here? And I started thinking about it. Think about the GPS. What does she do? What does this voice do? It gives instructions in a soft, gentle voice. He makes the wrong turn. She doesn't get angry. She doesn't yell, you idiot, what did you do here? She simply redirects to get him to the same point that she wants him to get to, in a calm voice, redirecting him. Oh, you want to go that way? Oh, okay, turn right here then. Same sweet voice. And I'm thinking maybe there's something to learn from a GPS about how we talk in our conversations. No criticism, sweet gentle voice, no anger, no screaming. Of course mistakes happen. Mistakes happen in our marriage, mistakes happen in our life. And again, if we go back to the book of Genesis, I think we realize again, how do we deal with mistakes? In the very first chapters, we see what happens. The biggest mistake for mankind. What happened? Adam eats from the tree, the forbidden tree.
But he blames his wife.
Okay, what happens? He eats from the tree, and what does he do after he eats? Anyone?
He hides.
He hides. He goes and he hides. He hides because he doesn't want to own up to the fact that he actually did what he wasn't supposed to do. What happens next? God calls him. God calls him. And what does he say when God calls him? I heard you calling me, but I was afraid. I was afraid because I'm unclothed, because I'm naked. God finally confronts him and says, why did you eat from the forbidden tree? And what does he say? It's not my fault. She made me. It's her. It's the woman that you gave me. You gave me her. She made me do it. When we're confronted with mistakes, we all make mistakes. It's programmed into our being, and it's okay to make mistakes. But what is our initial reaction? Honey, we gotta talk. Oh, yeah, no, sure, later. I'm busy right now. Sure, later, we'll talk. Honey, you've been avoiding me for the last 3 days. Me? Avoiding you? I wasn't avoiding you. I thought you were just a little upset. I figured I'd let you cool down first. Honey, the way that you treated me when we went there really embarrassed me. I embarrassed you? You're taking it totally the wrong way. That's not what I meant at all. And besides, you always put me in these uncomfortable situations. Hide, deny, blame. That's how we always react to things. We hide, we deny it, we blame. We don't like to confront the situation. When we finally do confront it, we deny that we've done it. Once we are put into the corner that's shown that you did do it, we blame the other guy. The woman that you gave me, you were the one that gave me, she made me do it. Now imagine, did you ever think of this? I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, imagine if God confronts Adam and says to him, Adam, why did you eat from the tree? Imagine if Adam would say, gosh, I can't believe that. You're so right. I can't believe I did that. Imagine the one mitzvah, the one commandment that you gave me, the one thing that you said I can't do, all the things I could eat from, the one thing you told me not to eat from, I go and do it. I'm so sorry. Could you imagine how history might have changed? I don't know, in my mind I imagine God saying, I am disappointed with what you did, but because you realize what you've done, and because you're truly sorry for it, I forgive you. The biggest problem, and we're going to conclude with this, biggest issue that most of us have, though, is what if I'm just not in the mood? This is all really nice, you're telling me how we should be behaving, and when I'm rational, when I'm thinking, when I'm being generous, when I'm ready to be patient, when I'm not in my anger, when I don't have my goggles on, I could do it. But what if I'm just not in the mood? Sometimes you're not in the mood. I'm not in the mood of being nice. I'm not in the mood of being sensitive. I'm not in the mood of being caring. I'm not in the mood of being generous. I'm just not in the mood. And for this, I'd like to conclude with a story. This is a story that happened at the time of the prophets with a woman who came to the prophet Elisha. She was a woman who had lost her husband. Her husband also was a prophet. And she says to Elisha, she says, my husband has died. And I have no money. And now the creditors want to take my children as slaves. My 2 sons, they want to take them away as slaves. And what am I to do? What does Elisha answer her? He says, tell me, what do you have in your home? She says, in my home? There's nothing in my home. I'm poor, I don't have anything. The only thing I have in my home is 1 small cruse of oil. That's it. He says, if that's the case, go out, go to your neighbors, and borrow vessels. Pots, pans, all kinds of vessels, containers, jars, everything that you can get a hold of. Just borrow as many vessels as you can and bring them to your home. And then start pouring from your cruse of oil. She does that. She borrows many vessels. She gets back into her home. She starts taking her cruse and she starts pouring. And it pours and pours and pours. And it fills all the pots and pans that she borrowed, all the jugs, all the jars, until she says to her son, get me some more, get me another one. He says, all the jars are filled, and the cruse stops pouring. With the money that she got from all this oil, she sells all the money, she pays all her creditors, and she lives on the rest for the rest of her life. The Kabbalistic masters see this as a lesson for us in how to lead more inspirational lives and in how to lead more inspirational relationships. They see it as a metaphor. The woman is each of us. She comes to the prophet and she says, my husband has died. We go to God and we say, our service of God is dead. Our relationships are dead. Our joy for life is dead. We're missing the passion, the vibrancy in our life. We're missing that joy de vivre, that joy of being alive. It's gone. It's dead. The creditor wants to come and enslave my children, to take my children as slaves. We are enslaved by our animalistic inclinations. We're completely enslaved by the busyness of our lives. The running, the doing, the career, the jobs. We're so busy doing that it's enslaving us. It's leaving us no time. It's suffocating our relationships. It's suffocating our joy. It's suffocating our passion. There's no room anymore. There's no passion left. No love. No life. And what does the prophet say? He says, hold on. What do you have in your home? What's in your home? Take stock of your situation. You can't possibly be dead, because if you were dead, you wouldn't feel this longing. Your relationship can't have been killed. It's still alive. It might be flickering. It might not be so vibrant, but it's still there, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't feel this longing, this yearning. Take stock of your situation. What do you have in your home? And she answers, the only thing I have in my home is 1 small cruse of oil. The oil represents that pristine state. Just like oil doesn't mix with any other liquid, it represents that part of ourselves, that unshakable part of ourselves, that core of ourselves, the soul within ourselves. And of course, every spouse is 1/2 of the soul of the other. That part within ourselves that is whole constantly, that can't be sullied. That spark of the relationship that's there, that connects us, that soul level. She says, that's all I have is 1 cruse of oil. And what does he say to her? That's fine. Now go out and borrow. Borrow vessels. Just make sure a lot of vessels. As many vessels as you can get a hold of. Vessels represent deeds. Do. He's advising her, do. Just act. You don't feel like you're in the mood? Act like you're in the mood. You don't feel like you're in the mood for your spouse? Act like you're in the mood for your spouse. Act lovingly. Husbands, go out and buy roses for your wives. Wives, go out and buy that special something for him. Act. Do it. Most of us can't live lives of perpetual inspiration, perpetual vitality, perpetual connection. But when that soul of ours does surface, when that cruise of ours does surface, it needs to have vessels to fill. If we saturate our day with meaning, with a routine that's a meaningful routine, with acts of kindness, with acts of goodness, with meaningful things in our lives, when that soul does surface, it will have what to fill. May we all be blessed with filling our day with meaningful acts, with filling our schedule with meaningful activities, with coming to a realization that the line and the circle can meet, and they can meet in happiness if we can only understand one another. Just going to conclude with a little quip. They say over Aryeh Levin, who was a great tzaddik, a very great righteous man that lived in Yerushalayim. He once came to the doctor with his wife. His wife's foot was in terrible pain. It was hurting her a lot. He came to the doctor and he says to the doctor, "Please, you must help us. My wife's foot is hurting us." To him there was no, it's her pain, it's my pain. If her foot is hurting, it's hurting us. We all need to cultivate within ourselves that sensitivity, like Rav says, be sensitive to one another, on her terms, on his terms, understand where they're coming from, and let us build meaningful activities in our day to reach a meaningful life. Thank you.